Hello, thank you for joining me this week. And there's a couple of things that I really want to touch on this week that I feel are super important for where we're at as a collective, where we're moving as a collective, and also a little bit about where I'm at with the with what I'm going to be talking about, a little bit about my journey with it. And again, I'm just doing a kind of free-flowing video, just kind of seeing what comes through around this. So the theme that I have been noticing, I mean, it's been around for a long time. There's no denying it. But for me personally, I have been noticing this particular theme really coming up in the last couple of weeks, and that is embodiment. And it, particularly in the last week and a half, I cannot stress enough how much this message was coming through for me around, I was seeing it not only in myself, but I was just witnessing it. And it was like igniting all of this stuff in me, about how we practice as psychics, about how we practice as healers. So much stuff was coming up, like so much stuff. And I went to the most beautiful energy medicine women's circle at the weekend in Loch Lomond, and just was there with just the most beautiful, amazing women. And what was coming up for me was embodiment. And it was so interesting because I had been channeling when I was on the train there, and I was channeling all this stuff about embodiment. And then what happens when I get there? I feel super disembodied. And, it can be hard when you're super sensitive, and I'm sure lots of people are going to resonate with what I'm saying. It's hard when you're super sensitive and you go into group spaces. And, for me, it's like, I'm okay if I have if I'm holding space, I'm fine. But when I'm not holding space, then I just have to show up just as who I am without that kind of role almost. I can find it really challenging. And so all this stuff was, despite the fact obviously the circle was beautiful and so supportive and all of that stuff, it was shining a light on me, on my triggers, and I was, as someone as well that in the last couple of years, I've spent a lot of time on my own. I've been traveling on my own. I've been on this very kind of solitary journey and experienced a lot of things within sort of friendships over the past two years or so, which just kind of showed me that these friendships that I'd had for so many years just weren't in alignment anymore. And, people that I thought I was going to be friends with forever, and just having to let go of those friendships and realizing that they were no longer for me or for them anymore. And so it can be sometimes challenging coming into these social spaces when, I'm very kind of comfortable living what is quite often a sort of more solitary kind of lifestyle. And, obviously I work with a lot of clients and things like that. But in terms of my social life, I'm kind of just stepping back into having more of a prominent social life, into that being more part of who I am again. And so it was just bringing up all sorts of stuff in me. And another thing it was kind of raising in me as well was, as somebody that's very attuned to my, cosmic aspect of my consciousness, and always kind of have been, I was saying in one of my more recent videos that I could read my galactic records before I was able to more consciously read my Akashic earth records, and that's just part of my blueprint. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that it comes with its own unique set of challenges. And I think that with this sort of idea of embodiment, everybody's journey is going to look different, because we all have different relationships with the body. We all have different relationships with how we nourish the body, whether that's through food or self-care practices or all sorts of things, and I've had so many experiences where I learned from a very young age that my body was not a safe place to be, especially as well growing up mixed race in Scotland, you know, and experiencing a lot of racial abuse, that taught me that fundamentally there was something wrong with my body. And, you know, so many other experiences I've had. I could talk all day about various experiences I've had, which taught me that my body was not a safe place to be. And so it's really been this process of learning to come back into it. And it's funny because I had actually been feeling as though I'd sort of climbed a bit of a mountain with my sense of embodiment. And it was almost like, you know, when you reach the top of the mountain, you then realize that you have to climb another. And so that's what this was kind of bringing up for me when I was at this circle was, fuck, you know, there's all these other ways that I've totally not embodied despite having come so far on my journey. And I have to reflect and honor that. And, you know, that's what this Capricorn full moon was all about. It was all about honoring our journey and where we've been and how far we've come. And so I would be doing myself a disservice if I didn't say, fuck, you know, I've come really, really far in terms of how grounded I feel in my body. You know, I used to be someone that I would lie down to go to sleep at night and I would just start coming out my body consciously. You know, I know that people tend to astral project when they're sleeping, but most often they're completely unconscious of it. So many people don't even remember their dreams. I would have to fight with my astral body, like, no, I'm not having another out of body experience. I need to sleep in my body. You know, I need to, like, you know, it's this constant battle for me. And, you know, I can see how far I've come since then when I was like maybe 20, when that was 2021, whatever, when that was happening to me all the time. And so I have to like honor those parts of me that have worked really hard to come into this vessel and to be okay within it. But it was also like, okay, you still got all this work to go, you know? And so I've really been tuning into Rudolph Steiner recently. I've really been tuning into Gigi Young's interpretations of Rudolph Steiner, and I feel that they are some of the most important teachings of our time. And, you know, I see them coming more into the sort of spiritual community. I think a lot of people maybe aren't ready to sit with Steiner's work and really look at it, you know, because it's a lot, you know, but it just, for me, it just reverberates truth, you know. And I think it's you know, if it's something that, you know, when I'm talking about this and you feel called to investigate it, then I, you know, do it, because it will have something there for you. And what he talks about is these two impulses that of the time that we are living in, which are so kind of pull us away from the middle path, which would be the path of Christ, of the Christed essence, you know. And I'm not talking about this from a dogmatic spiritual perspective, but I'm talking about Christ as in the Christ light, as in the journey of the heart, as in that sort of middle path, that Christ essence, Christ consciousness, you know, which people talk about in that very much in the sort of new age scene. It has much deeper roots than we give it credit for, or than we truly understand. And so with that being the sort of middle path and something that lives within inside everybody, we also have these other impulses, which are the Luciferic impulse, which is this over spiritualization of everything, which is this idea that we can use spirituality to bypass, and we can use spirituality to run away from our problems. And with that, we often end up connecting in with false light. Now, I do plan on doing a longer video on false light, because there's so much to talk about, and I see it in clients, I see it in people, a lot, especially people that are tuned into the new age, because often people, they just want to open up, they just want to hear their guides. And when you have this, you know, spirituality, true spirituality, it's all about surrender. It's all about receptivity. The feminine aspect of it is about being receptive, and that's how we access higher spiritual realms. We don't access higher spiritual realms by going, I want to speak to my guides, talk to me. Because if you are in that kind of frequency, that kind of vibration, you're going to draw in Luciferic beings, you're going to draw in white lighters, you're going to draw in these lower astral entities who are there to feed off of you. There's there's something very parasitic about the lower astral realm. There's so if you're still working with a lot of codependency issues in your life, you can't have a sovereign relationship with your spirit guides, because, when we come into communion with our higher aspects, it has to be from a place of sovereignty, of going, I know in my heart that you're not better than me and I'm not better than you, and you're not telling me something that I don't already know. And that's really important, because otherwise we end up with this imbalance, and that's what these beings come in and they feed off of, and they go, we're your parents, we're the, they have this parentified element. No higher being, being from a higher realm, it's okay to acknowledge that there are higher realms. It doesn't mean that they're better. It's not hierarchy in the sense of we are better than you. That's not it. So none of these beings are going to come into your field and tell you that they're a parent. That's what a lower astral being is going to do. It's going to try and lure you into this idea, one, that there's a parental element, or that they're in some way above you, and two, that you're really, really special. So that's why it's really important, because a lot of people that come in spirituality, a lot of people just with wounding, we want to think that we're special, and in ways everybody is special, right? But we're not better, and that's what these beings will play off of. They will play off this idea that you are in some way better or more advanced than other people, and that you have something that other people don't. And that's where we fall into those false light spaces. And that's why, I always say to people, I'm like, look, ground down first, before you try and access those higher realms. And, I'm speaking as somebody who has done so much stuff on my, my wounding, my trauma, all of that, right, for years and years and years. And still I can struggle with grounding, as somebody who is, does sessions and things like that, I can still, struggle with that grounding piece, because it's a lot to ground in. And so it's just really important that we anchor ourselves, that we have those fundamental foundations of that healing of those wounds of self-worth. And look, I'm not saying that everyone who is a healer, or me, or anyone is like completely healed their self-worth wounds. That's not the case at all. However, it's almost like having, at least worked on that in some way, because otherwise you're going to get tricked. It's going to be, and your discernment level isn't attuned enough that you realize that you're not getting tricked, and part of opening up as a psychic multidimensional being is you will encounter these beings, because you need to know what their frequency feels like. However, you want to be in a place where you're able to handle that, and you're not going to get sucked into it, but where you're going, okay, I see what's going on here. I know the difference between this, and I know the difference between false light and real light, because there is a big difference. But if you are in your wounding, you're not going to know the difference. You're not going to be able to feel it, because you don't feel that divinity within yourself yet. And so how can you recognize truly that divinity within others? What you're in is a place of codependency and pain. And so that's what you're going to attract. You're not going to be able to, they call it the eye of the needle for a reason. And that's the passage through the lower astral into the higher realms. You're not going to be able to pass through that, because you're still too dense, and so it's just really key that we do that stuff that we don't want to do, that deep emotional work, that inner child healing. It's so important. It's so important. And these foundations that we lay for ourselves now will determine how far and how high we can go in the future, because you don't want to get to a point where you're bypassing everything, and then you open up, and then you're then drawing in all of this stuff, and you can't discern what's actually best and highest for you, because then things get really messy, So just the message coming through so strongly is just like, fundamentally work on that stuff that you feel seems boring, those lower chakras, the root, the sacral, the solar, all of that stuff, the guilt, the self-worth, the blocked sexual creativity, feelings of being unsafe and ungrounded, that's the stuff you want to work on before you start connecting in with those higher ways to attune, you know, because it's so key. It's so key. And then the other part of what Steiner touches on is Ahriman. I say touches on, that he goes in really, really deep. But what I'm going to touch on is Ahriman. That would be the other impulse of our time, which is all about materialization. So it's like, on one hand, you have this Luciferic impulse, which is like this over spiritualization, which is this really, you know, you're going too high, too far without grounding. And then it's not relevant for the time, you know. It's all about being with the time of now. And that is the Christ impulse, that is love, that is forgiveness, that is connection, that's embodiment. And the Ahriman impulse is to do with over materialization, because you want to be embodied, you want to be able to bring the spiritual into the material and harmonize those, but you don't want to be too much either way. And so the Ahriman impulse is to do with this sort of over technologification I don't think that's a word, but it is now of society, and that over materialization in terms of AI, in terms of transhumanism, you know, these things where we believe that the human evolves through technology as opposed to through the heart, as opposed to through God, as opposed to through our spiritual essence, you know. And truly it's both, you know. It's not one or the other. It's about bringing the spirit into the body. It's about how much of your soul can you anchor into this vessel. And so that is really the main kind of essence of what I wanted to capture in this video. And I just know it's something I'm going to be touching on more and more, because it's something that I'm seeing more, I'm witnessing more as I am becoming more aware of these impulses and how they play out within our world. And, you know, just to kind of highlight as well, is that even psychics that are very, very proficient can get caught up in the lower astral, can get caught up in the lower realms. Helena Blavatsky is a perfect example. You know, she was put in a occult imprisonment, which is a ceremonial magic ritual to kind of bind her in order to protect her, because she had gone too far into this Luciferic impulse and was too disembodied, you know. And so people stepped in order to protect her consciousness. And so what I'm saying is that it can happen to anyone, because it's so easy to bypass our stuff. It's so easy to not look at it. And so, you know, my message to you would be, see that stuff, see that thing that you don't want to look at it, because further down the line it will come back and it will bite you. You know, that's the kind of that's the way these things work. Is like you cannot escape your trauma. It's cyclical, you know. It will come back round, you know. So it's like in all those times of you know, particularly sort of Mercury retrograde, that's really our time where things, you know, if you notice something coming up for you during that, deal with it then. I used to notice this myself. It's like, if I didn't deal with something on a particular retrograde, I would see it again, the exact same thing in the next retrograde, and I'd be like, shit, I should have dealt with it on the last one. As well, women with your period cycles, with your menstruation, that's a really wonderful time to deal with your stuff. You know, you'll start to see it coming up in your premenstrual, and then it's like when you bleed, that's when you release it. That's when you're dying, you're in that winter phase, you're in that crone phase. That's when you're able to kind of to really release stuff that you're holding on to, you know. So I think really an important part of this embodiment aspect is getting in touch with your cycles and your seasons that you live through within yourself. You know, the body is a perfect mirror for the, you know, the macrocosm for everything outside of it. And just as the earth goes through her seasons and her cycles, and all of the planets do, so do we. And they're always initiating us into the higher aspects of ourselves. So when we bypass, we're kind of ignoring those things which are ushering in change for us, because of course everything's always happening for our highest good, but we have free will within that, and we can choose things which aren't for our highest good, you know. So it's always about going, okay, what decisions am I making? How am I not recognizing certain things in myself? How am I bypassing? You know, we can all do it, and it's just important to go, what is it that I'm bypassing? How am I gonna look at that, reflect on it, sit with myself, you know, sit with myself in those dark spaces, and anchor in those changes and those things which are ready to die within me, and how am I going to call in the new? So thank you. I hope you found this video helpful. Feel free to leave me a comment, let me know how this landed with you, because I know there's a lot of I feel like I said a lot. It's been like 20 minutes, but I feel like I said a lot. But yeah, let me know. And, you know, if you ever kind of want to go a little bit deeper, you know, I'm here. You feel free to reach out to me. And so, yes, thank you so much. Take care and enjoy the rest of your day.